Hey everyone, my name is Scott and welcome to the Media Guy channel on YouTube. And what I've been watching. I watched 6 movies this week. Let's talk about them. Columbus is a 2017 film starring John Cho and Haley Lu Richardson. And the reason I watched this film in particular is because it was shot entirely on location in Columbus, Indiana. It's like an hour from here. And while I have been in Columbus many times throughout my life, I've never really stopped to look around and didn't really realize that the city is somewhat of a mecca for modern architecture. It has some absolutely stunning buildings, and the city is somewhat the first character in this story. John Cho plays a son who has to travel to Columbus to take care of his sick father. Along the way, he meets a young girl played by Haley Lu Richardson. They're both kind of in a place in their life where they're kind of stagnant in their lives, and they strike up a quick friendship. She lives in a town that she very much admires, and he is stuck in a town that he very much knows nothing about. He has also been out and seen the world, where she has stayed in one city her entire life and dreams of a life that is outside of Columbus to a point. She has to stay in Columbus for reasons that you learn throughout the film. First thing I thought after I got done watching this film was the city looks amazing. You can debate the plot points of the film, but this is a calling card movie for this city to be a film set. Which, for those of you who don't know, is very hard to do because the state of Indiana does not give tax breaks to film companies to shoot here. So a lot of movies that take place in Indiana are actually shot elsewhere, which makes Columbus rare. But after the movie got done, I thought, man, that was a lot of talk of architecture. But the theme of the film is asymmetry. The church that sits next to the Columbus Library was designed with asymmetry in mind. Everything is off-center. It's very unique looking. And the film plays with that not only in shooting style, but in how the characters relate to each other. Much like the architecture that they visit, these two characters seem to be good for one another, but at times they are asymmetrical. So you get a lot of that with the character building, you get a lot of that with the shooting style. There's a lot of shots that are off-center for that reason. So the look of the film is great, the characters are great, and the acting is great. John Cho's an underrated actor. I know a lot of people know him from Harold and Kumar, but he's done great work since then. And Haley Lu Richardson seems to be cutting out a pretty interesting career for herself. But all in all, and I may be biased because I'm from Indiana, I really enjoyed this film. It is a gorgeous film, beautifully told, looks great, and just overall, just a beautiful experience. Tag is the story of lifelong friends that have been playing the same game of tag for 30-some years. 1 month a year they set aside and they play tag. They dress up, they surprise each other. It's a way for them to keep bonded throughout their lives. It stars Jon Hamm, Jake Johnson, Ed Helms, and Jeremy Renner. Renner plays the best tag player they've ever seen. He's never been tagged in all of his years. So they get the gang back together to go to Jeremy Renner's wedding to try to tag him. This movie was fine. Just fine. It's entertaining throughout its running time. It's nothing to write home about. Most of the laughs come from Hannibal Buress's character or Isla Fisher's character. You can't possibly say that Isla Fisher does not commit to a role. The film sits at a borderline of these are actors having fun with each other and these are characters having fun with each other, which is unfortunate because a lot of times I'm like, oh, there's Jon Hamm, not whatever his character's name is. If you may have noticed, I didn't name any of their characters in the intro. But it's entertaining, it's fine, it just kind of washes over you and then it's over. Ma is a Blumhouse horror movie which stars Academy Award winner Octavia Spencer, Academy Award winner Allison Janney, and Academy Award nominee Juliette Lewis, and a bunch of kids you've never seen before. It is the story of Octavia Spencer's character Ma, who didn't have a great childhood, so she's making up for it by befriending some teenagers, buying them booze, and letting them party in her basement. And when kids become kids, she gets a little murdery. This movie edges up to camp so often that it sits on a razor's edge between The inclusion of these actresses make this movie better, and this content is beneath them. It just sits there right on that edge. And I'm torn on which side it falls on. Would this movie be worse with someone else than Octavia Spencer playing the lead role? Probably. Does she need to be in this movie? Not necessarily. Is she good in this movie? Absolutely. I mean, the performance is creepy and unsettling, and at times heartbreaking, but the movie as a whole doesn't do anything with her performance that is outside the norm of a movie of this type. It is not scary enough to get real horror fans into it. And in my book, if you're not going to be scary, you better be gory, and it's not that either. Octavia's central performance is good. The rest of the movie is bland and forgettable. It's not going to be the type of movie that true horror fans really gravitate to over and over. I described the movie Hellfest as being Playschool's my first horror movie. This is also Playschool's my first horror movie, with a great central performance. Dirty Dancing is you know what Dirty Dancing is. I don't need to tell you what Dirty Dancing is. This movie is iconic. I hadn't seen it for multiple decades at this point. It's not a movie that I've revisited often. I saw it a lot of times when I was a kid, but haven't seen it really since. While I was revisiting this film, I had two thoughts. The first being, this movie's pretty progressive for its time period. It was released in 1987, it's set in the 1960s, but released in 87, and is a rejection of Reaganism. I mean, as the film fades up, Baby talks about how problematic it is that they call her Baby. The inciting incident of the film is a botched abortion, and there's a point where a douchey waiter tries to give Baby a copy of The Fountainhead, and she rejects it. And while all those plot points would work in the 1960s, it's interesting that at the end of the Reagan era, this movie came out with these plot points. It's very progressive for the time. My second thought was that there's no objective science to what will make a movie iconic. If you know anything about this film and its release, it was a bit of a mess along the way. Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze hated each other throughout the shoots at times. First-time filmmaker working for a very small studio, the rough cut of the film was a disaster. But still, given all those warning signs, this movie almost immediately entered the zeitgeist. It has iconic scenes, shots that became notable movie history. And while there are filmmakers that exist today that really want to orchestrate these moments, looking at you, James Cameron, you can't really orchestrate something like this. It just happens. And that's a part of what makes these movies magical, is you can't figure out why it happens. It's just lightning in a bottle. And that's what Dirty Dancing is. It is lightning in a bottle. It's not up to the filmmaker to try to orchestrate these moments. The audiences will tell you what is iconic, and this movie is iconic. The Meg stars Jason Statham and Rainn Wilson hunting a giant shark. For this being a giant shark movie, it's really boring. And I think the reason for that is it just takes itself way too seriously. I have seen Jason Statham performances that are humorous. This is not one of them. This is Jason Statham being badass Jason Statham. It's up to all the surrounding characters to bring the humor, and they just don't for a large part of the running time. There are certain times where there are jokes, but for the most part, this is played straight. And it's a goofy shark movie. The special effects are relatively good throughout, but this movie cribs from every giant animal movie you've ever seen, especially Jaws. But about 100 times stupider and more dull. When the blood and guts happen, it is fun at times, but for the most part, this is just a dull slog of a movie. Girl in the Spider's Web is a movie I forgot I even watched. I guess I should talk about the backstory of my history with the Millennium series. I read the first 3 books, written by Stieg Larsson before he passed away. My thoughts on that are that those books are sloppy, and mostly because he passed away and they didn't edit them. There's just a lot of unnecessary exposition in those books that make them kind of hard to get through, especially Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. David Fincher's film that came out with Rooney Mara, probably my least favorite Fincher film. While Rooney Mara is very good in that movie and Daniel Craig's decent in that movie, man, there's just a lot of scenes of people looking at Polaroids in that film. Doesn't make for an exciting filmmaking experience. So this movie is based on the fourth book in the series written by another author, and swap out Rooney Mara for Claire Foy, and also no Daniel Craig. There's basically no Michael Blomkvist in this film at all. I mean, he's a character, he exists, but he does almost nothing. The reason I bring up the original books in the series is that this series is very much about journalism. Lisbeth Salander is very much a side story to these books. But in this movie, she is the main character. And to have someone so stoic and lifeless and serious be your main character, it's hard to empathize with her. But that's not the point of her character, right? Her character seeks revenge on people that have done others wrong. You're supposed to empathize with the victims of the people she seeks out. She is the boogeyman, boogie woman. Claire Foy is fine as Lisbeth. She's not Rooney Mara, who brought a sense of vulnerability to the character. But as an action performer, she's fine. The plot is a little silly. It's shot pretty competently. But for the most part, much like Fincher's film, it is not a remarkable film in any way. It's a film that I watched and I literally forgot about the instant it was over. I had no emotional involvement in this film at all. In addition to all those movies, I got caught up on Doctor Who this week. The 12th series of Doctor Who starring Jodie Whittaker. It had its ups and downs moments. I think it was a little bit better overall than the 11th series, where the showrunners seemed to struggle to figure out what was going on with Doctor Who. This series seemed a little bit more above board as far as writing is concerned. It seems like they figured out what they wanted to do with their version of the Doctor, and it led to some good acting moments from Jodie Whittaker and some compelling plot lines towards the later stages of the series. I still have to watch the Christmas special from this last Christmas. Probably going to do that tonight or tomorrow, and we'll talk about that next week. I'm also watching another British series that I don't want to mention right now because I don't want spoilers from you kids in comments, so we will talk about that hopefully next week when I finish it. Until then, thanks for watching. I will see you next week. It's not that I don't trust you, I just don't trust you. Bye.